Tonight, 50% cut in import duties and lots of jabs at the NDC, accused by the Vice President of exhibiting warped logic in criticizing the government for the recent fluctuations in the value of the cedi.
So if the fundamentals are weak, the exchange rate will expose. But it is warped logic to jump from that to a conclusion that if there is depreciation in their currency, then the fundamentals must be weak. But the NDC logic will insist, in the face of contrary evidence, that since you cannot walk, then it must mean your leg must be broken.
Tonight, we will interrogate Dr. Bawumia's report on the economic performance in the last 2 years, and we will hear from the NDC.
This is Top Story with Evans Mensah.
And Top Story is always brought to you by Bond Savings and Loans. Your success, our passion. Gasem, the nation builder. Vodafone, the future is exciting, ready, and Nationwide Medical Health Insurance, your healthcare family. He became the butt of jokes, taunted by his political opponent for losing his appetite for public lectures on the economy since he became the vice president and chairman of the economic management team. Well, today, Dr. Mamadou Bawumia emerged from what the NDC had recently termed his self-imposed exile to confront his accusers. Dr. Bawumia confronted the most challenging economic issues that has earned him a barrage of criticism in the last few weeks, and he came all guns blazing, wielding not only attacks of his own, but also cuts to import duties, the biggest news of them all. As much as 50% reduction will take effect in the next 12 hours at the port. Listen.
Cabinet is making these reforms, these decisions with the objective of increasing trade facilitation and efficiency and revenue. Port revenue depends on volume. Port revenue depends on volume. So if you don't have the trade facilitation, you will not have the volume. And if you don't have the volume, you will not have the revenue. And this is that is what the thinking that is informing these decisions. So we are looking at increasing revenue. But to do so, we cannot be uncompetitive between Ghana and our next door neighbors. That is just shooting ourselves in the foot. So, to reduce the incidence of smuggling and enhance revenue, the benchmark delivery values of imports will be reduced by 50%. This, however, for vehicles, the reduction will be 30%. This is because vehicles already attract an amount of depreciation, which if you factor it in, it will take you closer to the 50%. This will be effective from tomorrow.
We will get loads of reaction to this if you join us on Newsnight, because we've been speaking to importers, we've been speaking to exporters, we've been speaking to local manufacturers, we've been speaking to the folks at Bosokai, we have the AGI. Lots of reaction coming up on Newsnight till this. But right now, I want to go into some of the specifics, and I want to bring in right now, and a lot of the things that Bawumia said was a comparison between what they have done the last 2 years to what the NDC did in the last 8 years, for example. And a particular concern to him was the performance of the exchange rate, which you know has become one of the topical things since the city started behaving and fluctuating, sharp falls, sharp rises in the last few weeks. We've had a minority say a lot about this, and then the Vice President reserved a chunk of his address today to deal with that, also revealing what he believes to be the real reason behind the fluctuations that we've seen in the city depreciation. I've just been joined on the telephone line right now by a man who was also at the helm as far as the economy was concerned under the previous administration, former Deputy Finance Minister, spokesperson for the minority in Parliament on finance issues, Kaysela Tofosin. Mr. Tofosin, thank you for your time here on Top Story. And I must say that, of course, we had reached out to government, to the MPP, to be part of this conversation, but they have declined categorically, saying they don't want to be part of this conversation. So we'll do it with the NDC. And then we'll also bring in Peter Quarty, who's an economist, who, of course, with a neutral mind, who was at the event today, asked a question of his own as we analyze from that point of view as well. You can join us with your own views as well on this all-important conversation. But let me start with you. Because I want to start with, I guess, the most important issue today, apart from the cuts that will come to the import duties, but the city's depreciation. Now, that is where Dr. Bawumia reserved a lot of I guess, jabs at you, but also addressing the real issues that we've seen over the last few days. You recall in 2014, he did a lecture in which he made the famous pronouncement that if the fundamentals are weak, the exchange rate will expose you. And I know, Mr. Tofosin, you've touched on this before, and you've talked about the double standards, especially on the back of the Finance Ministry's own statement to Parliament last week, where he places the reason for the depreciation not on fundamental weakness, but also on rigidities. Today, the Vice President brought back that quote, but he owned it with an explanation. Listen.
You will recall that I stated in 2014 that if the fundamentals are weak, the exchange rate will expose you. That was true then, and it is true now. It is 100% correct.
So, if it is true now, how then does he explain what is happening with the cedi? It's gone to 5.9, almost inching to 6 cedi to the dollar, and then has fallen back sometime to 5.1. He's going back up again to 5.6. He explains. Listen.
So if the fundamentals are weak, the exchange rate will expose you. But it is warped logic to jump from that to a conclusion that if there is depreciation in your currency, then the fundamentals must be weak. Do you understand the logic? It is very warped logic. If the fundamentals are weak, the exchange rate will expose you. But if the exchange rate moves, you cannot jump to that conclusion that the fundamentals are weak. That defies logic. There could be other external factors causing the exchange rate depreciation. For example, if I tell you that if your leg is broken, you are going to be unable to walk, then I'm somewhere and somebody comes to tell me, this person is unable to walk. Can I just conclude that their leg must be broken? There can be other reasons why you are unable to walk, but the NDC logic will insist, in the face of contrary evidence, that since you cannot walk, then it must mean your leg must be broken. In 2014, the exchange rate depreciated by 31.3%. The fiscal deficit was 10.1% of GDP. The public debt rose to 70.2% of GDP. Inflation rose to 17%. And GDP growth had declined from 7.3% to 4%. In other words, the economic fundamentals had weakened significantly, and therefore the depreciation was easily explainable. It was not caused by dwarfs or high-rise buildings, as we were told. The exchange rate in 2014 had exposed the weak economic fundamental.
Mr. Tofosin, he says, what logic to suggest that just merely because the cedi has fluctuated in its depreciation, then that reason, the one single reason must be that the fundamentals are weak. You accept that you've exhibited warped logic as a finance as a vice president has said today.
Evans, let me say that the vice president's logic today is indeed irrational. Irrational in the sense that you can see an attempt by a vice president who has been exposed so badly because of his own words being played at him and trying so hard to rehabilitate himself, to come out and come in a way, try as much as he can to rationalize the point. But his logic defeats exactly what he was trying to do. Was he telling us that in the past, the exogenous shocks that he's talking about does not exist then, and so therefore now it is only the fundamentals? And indeed, he failed to give us a tangible reasons to point to the fact that the cedi is actually depreciating as we speak against the US dollar and other major international currencies. He failed to mention that. I spent some time to listen to him, and I can tell you that when it got there, he failed to even make a pronouncement that as we speak, the cedi is actually underperforming. The strength of our currency is weakening by the day. It stopped only at the time that the cedi gained some momentum and got to about 1.1, 1.2. Why is it that his trying to be very, very economical with the truth? I mean, almost all the numbers that he put out there have confirmed most of them are lies. And I'll give you some of the details. He mentioned that in the year 2012, the fiscal deficit then was 12.2%. That is not true. Indeed, it was 10.3%. He also mentioned that the fiscal deficit in the year 2013 was 11.7%. That is not true. It was 8.4%. He went ahead to say that in the year 2014, the fiscal deficit was 11.9%. According to the budget statement of government, the amount is 7.4%. Again, 2015, 6.7%. Again, that is not true. It is 5.3%. He went ahead to say 2016, the fiscal deficit is 9.3%. That is not true. It's 7.8%. You see, these are numbers according to government official statistics from the Ministry of Finance website. Government official statistics. So he come out, lie to the public, take impression that they are doing so well, but when it gets to their side, he's only comparing their ratios that indeed relate to the new series. He uses old series during NDC, and when it comes to their time, he uses new series. Even I also heard him this morning when he was speaking and said that the life of debt service as a percentage to revenue is coming down under their watch. You know what he did? He took debt service as a percentage to GDP under the NDC. He used the series. Under NPP, he uses the new series. So impressions are created that indeed they are doing better under their watch than NDC is doing. But the question I ask myself is that you don't use your GDP to pay for your debt service, you use revenue. So I was expecting him to compare debt service as a percentage to revenue. Why is he running away from that? And you will notice that he's been exposed. Again, you will notice that he said that wages as a percentage to GDP. We don't use GDP to pay for wages, we use revenue. So again, I was expecting him to compare wages as a percentage to revenue and give us the time series so that we all know they are doing better or they are not doing better. He only picks and chooses. I mean, what he did was he only picked the GDP old series and the NDC, and then take the GDP new series.
Let's stay for a second. Let's stay for a second with the exchange rate subject, which he touched on today. You've mentioned figures that you claim that he either misrepresented or peddled obvious falsehood. However, he puts out verified BOG cedi depreciation figures and compares what they've done in the last 2 years to yours, which is in 2017, they cedi depreciated by 4.9%, 2018, 8.4%, 2019 so far 5.12%. If you compare that to yours, and the figures show, I mean, your best performance in terms of cedi depreciation was 9.7% as of 2016. He says this exactly to you as far as those hard statistics are concerned. Listen.
The data, ladies and gentlemen, on the annual rate of depreciation of the cedi
in recent years, and you will see this graph here, it's like night and day. The data on the annual rate of depreciation of the cedi in recent years shows that the worst performance so far under the MPP government, the 8.4% depreciation that we saw in 2018, that worst performance is better than the best performance under the previous government between 2012 and 2016. So our worst is better than your best. And then you say boot for boot. This one is more like boot for Chalewote.
Mr. Tuforson, that is fact, is it not?
Even you cannot take the first quarter 2019 and compare with 4 quarters of the year.
No, that is not what he did. He talked about the entire depreciation for 2018, which is 8.4 compared to your best of 2016. One full year comparisons.
Under an IMF program, the third year, fourth year of an IMF program. One, again, looking at the flows of oil revenue coming in, we shouldn't have depreciated by 8.something% in the year 2018. No. Even we had oil revenue receipts, almost $1 billion as flows. As flows. We have moved from net importer of crude oil to net exporter of crude oil under this regime. Based on the work that we have done in the year 2016, we brought on board Sankofa. It grew the economy. It brought in the revenue. You recall that in the year 2016 specifically, we recorded a negative oil growth. Reason being that the tariff bearing for some of the oil fields, particularly the FPSO, got broken to the extent that the revenue flow, the forex revenue flow coming into the economy was actually not coming. That actually had a negative impact on our reserve position. And that is why we recorded a negative growth of almost 47%. Going forward in the year 2017, we had repaired before we left. Again, the Sankofa oil field brought in additional revenue. Additional oil revenue. And so you could see that oil revenue moved from about $250 million to about $1 billion.
Are we still talking about the cedi's depreciation?
Yes, I'm talking about the cedi's depreciation because it has impact.
Are you disputing the figures you put out?
So I am saying that we cannot compare oranges with apples because you need to build a strong reserve. The net international reserve in itself is that position is such at any point in time. Anytime you need to intervene in the market, that is what you use to intervene in the market. Is your forex base. We had moved the balance of payments, in fact, to a positive before we left office. We did it. They have done nothing on that.
And now that you've touched on that, Dr. Bawumia today explains for the very first time what he says was the real primary reason why the cedi depreciated. I hope you listened to that, but if you didn't, for the benefit of our listeners, this is his explanation because it's a fact that the cedi had terribly depreciated in the last few weeks, rising close to 6 cedi to the dollar. Mr. Tuforson, this is his explanation. I'll ask you what you make of that explanation as we heard today.
The most important and the proximate cause of the recent depreciation is the time inconsistency of an IMF prior action on the reserves target. At the end of January, as part of the 7 prior actions to get to the IMF board and the completion of the IMF program, the IMF gave Ghana 7 actions to complete before March 15. 7 prior actions that we had to meet. 7 conditions. One of the conditions that the Bank of Ghana had to meet was to increase its net international reserves to the level of December 2018. To increase the net international reserves, however, meant that the Bank of Ghana could not sell any foreign exchange in the market. They had to essentially hold their hands to the back and could not intervene on the market during this particular period. So demand for foreign currency was not met by supply as normally happens on a day-to-day basis. And we know when the demand is greater than the supply, or the supply is not coming, the price will go up. And this is exactly what was happening. And this explains, what was happening. So once the reserves target was met, we then had the IMF board meeting on March 20th, which passed Ghana. So this partly explains why the city came under such pressure. It was the primary reason. Contrary to some speculation, the Bank of Ghana did not spend any reserves to revive the cedi following the initial depreciation. Some people have misunderstood the requirement by the IMF for the Bank of Ghana to build up its reserves by some $800 million to mean that the bank used $800 million to reverse the cedi depreciation. That will not be wise. The reason for the sudden reversal in the sharp depreciation that we observed was that the market corrected itself.
Mr. Attoforson, do you accept this explanation?
I don't. Unfortunately, that is not the case. In the first place, let me put on record that His Excellency the Vice President lied that the Bank of Ghana did not intervene in the market.
You say he lied?
He lied, yes.
What is the evidence?
He lied. I can say the evidence to be, you can go to the Central Bank website, look at their summaries, and then look at the month before the last MPC and the following month MPC. You can see the data change that they intervene in the market with an amount of 730 million US dollars. Clearly, I'm not the one saying it, and this is coming from Central Bank. I have the data in front of me, and I can give you the data. You can also check.
I'll be glad to have it.
Yes, I will check. I will send the data to you, and this is according to the Central Bank. This is according to the Central Bank. I'm not the one saying it. It's on the Central Bank website. You can also Google it and get it. But then let me go to the second point. The second point is that we all know that this currency is actually coming under severe pressure because of investors. Investors are actually selling sometimes at the secondary market. Some of them are actually repatriating not only coupons, but actually their principal, what they see that anytime it's called due, instead of them rolling it over, they are going away. This is a fact that the minister responsible for finance has come to Parliament to confirm. This is a fact that he himself, part of his speech, he mentioned that and conceded to the fact. The reason is not because of a build-up of net international reserve in December 2018 level. That is not the reason. The reason is that investors are losing confidence in the economy to the extent that they think that they have to exit the market. I was of the view that His Excellency the Vice President would have used this platform, indeed this platform, to calm the nerves of investors and to give them assurances that they should stay instead of doubling in propaganda and coming out with numbers that we all know that is not the truth. The numbers support exactly what I'm saying, and I will share the numbers with you. In fact, I can even send it to you now, because the truth is that the Central Bank's own data has confirmed to us that an amount of 730 million US dollars was used to support the currency.
I'm grateful that you joined us. That's Kaisel Attoforson. You want to join us on PM Expert because we're going to continue this conversation there with the experts, with himself as well, who will join us there. And of course, one of the things we'll be doing, as we always do here at Joy FM, we'll be fact-checking what Dr. Bawumia has said today, including what we've just heard again from Kaisel Attoforson. He says it's on the Bank of Ghana website. Our fact-checkers are already into it. You might hear it on Newsnight as we fact-check those claims and the figures that he put out, which ones check out and which ones do not. And I must indicate again that we had agreed to have Dr. Gideon Boako, who works in the Vice President's office, on the show. He had agreed and said he's going to be here right from Asempa. And then he calls and says, in fact, he was here, and says that he's been asked not to come on the show and that we're not going to have anybody from government on this particular conversation on Joy FM. And so that's why you don't have government side in the conversation. However, I've just been joined on the telephone line by Professor Peter Quartey, who with the University of Ghana, and he was at the event, and so he really understood a lot of the things. In fact, asked a question as far as the issue of jobs are concerned. Thank you very much, Prof, for your time here on Top Story.
Thank you, and good evening to your discerning listeners.
I'm grateful you could join us. One of the questions you asked today was, in essence, you posed a question about relating to jobs, and if I recall correctly, you said how has the microeconomic figures translated into jobs, and how many jobs have been created? Did you get an answer to that question that was satisfactory?
To some extent, yes, but I was expecting some figures in terms of how many jobs we have created, and basically compare with how many graduates, for instance, we are churning out of the tertiary institutions, and see the extent to which we, as a country, we are absorbing people into the labor market. But I didn't get that statistics. But nevertheless, I think we listened to a very brilliant lecture or presentation. The evidence were quite clear. The Vice President was speaking to data, and therefore I could relate to it quite well. And so for me, it was good, except that my question didn't get very well answered.
And I'm guessing you were looking for, you said how many? That was very specific. You were looking for hard numbers because you've done this for 2 years. You claim you've created jobs, factories are on. You were looking for the hard numbers to back those claims.
Exactly. So that if we know that we get the numbers and see that, look, we are not creating enough jobs, then if we have to double up, for instance, then that is where the policy direction should be. So that was the essence of my question.
I guess the biggest takeaway for me today was the explanation that he offered for the depreciation of the cedi we've seen in the last few weeks. I know we spoke to you when the cedi was misbehaving and people were complaining, almost hitting 60 to the dollar. And you spoke about it as well. And you talked about the fundamentals as well. And now that you've heard the Vice President's explanation, your reaction?
Yeah, I think his explanation added meaning or made sense to me because we have recorded reserves, balance of payment surplus in 2017 and 2018. Our reserves were going up, yet the exchange rate was depreciating. So for me, it was quite difficult to relate to why the central bank could not intervene if we had so much reserves. So his point that, look, the IMF says we should build reserves up to a certain level and before we could intervene made meaning to, or added meaning to the explanation. But you see, he also alluded to the point that exchange rate is an issue of demand and supply. If demand exceeds supply, then of course certainly prices will go up. Now, the point I heard... yes, speaking about foreign investors leaving the market, yes, nobody is disputing that. I don't think the Vice President disputed that point. It is evident that, yes, foreign investors were exiting the market because when the thought that the IMF is leaving and that whether we'll be able to manage our economy very well is number one. Then also, when the policy rate was reduced, investors reacted. They felt the rate shouldn't have reduced, and therefore some of them were exiting because the U.S. market was getting stronger and other markets as well. So I think that explanation was clearly provided. That is how I understood it. And many of the things he said, my personal understanding was that, yes, they made meaning.
This is very brief, and because you're a prof, I can ask you this. You mark papers all the time. If you listen, and this was the first time he's doing this, I know you preceded your question today by saying you've asked him to give a lecture again, and he said he gave you an answer you won't disclose. He's giving the lecture today, not a lecture town hall. He's given us his account of the economy. If you're assessing and marking him out of 10, what will you give him?
I will give you an 8 over 10.
Okay. And if you have 30 seconds to give him, tell me why. What would you say?
Yeah, if I had next time, I would be happy if they could back the presentation with employment figures. Because for me, that would be the icing on the cake. And once that is done, he gets 100%.
Thank you very much. Professor Peter Quartey is prof at the University of Ghana. Newsnight starts right now.